Okay, hello everyone. This is a call to actions radio, a new genre in radio, results-based radio. Today is February 17th, 2014. The subject is depopulation via fluoridation, and we are honored to welcome our guest to speak on these matters, Mr. Kevin Galalae. Thank you for joining us, and please let us know how you got involved in this area.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all, Kimberlee and Eugene. It's a pleasure to be able to address you and your audience. My story is really worth of a Hollywood movie because I didn't go into this, open-eyed. I sort of fell into it. I was studying at Oxford University in 2009. I was taking a course in political philosophy, and it became clear within a few weeks that the course was heavily censored. Now, a few months later, I had the exact same experience at Leicester University, where I had just started a master's program in international relations and global order. And within 6 or 7 weeks, it became clear once again that the program was heavily censored. And I could not understand why universities as reputable as Oxford and Leicester would engage in such a blatant act of censorship in programs of at the master's level. And of course, I took issue with this, and I withdrew from the courses, asked for my refund back, and then this is how the battle began with the British universities. And as I appealed for a refund, and in the case of Oxford, I appealed my expulsion. They kicked me out of the university on the grounds of having breached etiquette, having breached online etiquette, which is called netiquette, by the way. And so I went from one adjudication level to the other. They all turned out to be whitewashes. Then I took it to the highest adjudication level at the national level with the Office of the Independent Adjudicator. And that turned out to be a whitewash as well. And a year and a half later, I was able to take it to the highest European court, having exhausted all national adjudication levels in the UK. So I took the British government to court at the European Court of Human Rights, and that was in 2011, in March of 2011. And a month later, I went to Strasbourg, France, where the European Court is located, and began a hunger strike to draw attention to this issue, and to compel the Council of Europe to condemn the British government and to force the British government to refund all the students who had been violated, whose rights had been violated by this program. So this is how it all began. Of course, at that time, I had no clue that the program of censorship and surveillance that I had discovered at Oxford University and Leicester universities was just an offshoot of the greater depopulation policy. It took me 2 more years to come to that knowledge, and a few more arrests, because shortly after I came back from Strasbourg, France, that was on the 13th of May 2011, I was arrested. That was my first arrest. So 2 days after my return to Canada from Strasbourg, France, I was arrested. And since then, so in the past 2.5 years, I have been arrested 6 times. I have been in political exile in the United States for 10 months. And I have had to leave the country, leave Canada clandestinely in the middle of February by crossing over a half-frozen river into the U.S. Because the authorities were hot on my tail, trying to arrest me for the 5th time. So it has been a battle worthy of a Hollywood movie to be able to bring out the truths about the global depopulation policy, its methods and means, which I have done fully through the publication of 3 books to date on this subject and dozens of articles.
Why do you think it's such a big deal that they would want to shut you up from putting this information out there? What do they think? Why are you such a threat?
Well, since 1945, international peace and stability has relied entirely on this covert program of population control. And why? Having gone through the horrible experience of 2 world wars, policymakers and heads of state decided in 1945 that enough is enough, and the experience of a global war should never again be repeated. So the only alternative to war that was settled upon was the population control. So population control was chosen as a substitute to war, so as not to repeat, the ugly history of world wars. And of course, a third world war would have been a nuclear war, because both the United States and the Soviet Union at that time had developed nuclear weapons, and that would have meant assured mutual annihilation had it allowed to come to conflict again. So ever since 1945, unbeknown to the world, at least to the common people, international peace and stability have been maintained through population control. And this has been done by waging a low-intensity, sublethal chemical and biological warfare on the civilian population. If you want, a war of attrition that targets our reproductive systems so as to halt population growth and reverse it to a sustainable level before civilization collapses due to overpopulation, or before we run into conflict and over resources and come to blows. And that is the in a nutshell what has kept the peace for the past nearly 7 decades now.
Now, you have alternative solutions, which we can go into, which is kind of what we always try to focus on is, yeah, this is a system that's broken, it doesn't make sense to any of us, and why someone would choose to go in that direction when you could go to a positive direction, and we could, as a group, choose to keep our population low instead of having us undermined without, our consent, without our knowledge. And you put some statistics out there. I think it was in the Chemical and Depopulation book about the U.S. Public Health Service official policy was to begin fluoridation in, 1951?
That's correct. In 1951, the U.S. Public Health Service made fluoridation official policy. But it began earlier than that in 1944 with a pilot project in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But of course, the guinea pigs were not the Americans or the Canadians or any other European country. Rather, the Japanese were the first to receive fluoridation. Right after they surrendered in 1945, and of course, as the losing side, they were subjected to unconditional surrender, and part of the surrender was allowing the United States to fluoridate the population, and that was done intensively, the most intensive fluoridation campaign at that time. And this is why Japan never experienced a baby boom generation, which is the only Asian country to have had such a different demographic outcome due to fluoridation. Once the international community, the United Nations, the United States, Soviet Union, and the UK, who are the driving forces behind the depopulation program, once they realized that the methodology, the method of fluoride works, method which, by the way, had been tried and tested by the Soviets first in 1940 in the gulags, and by the Nazis on the Jews during the late 30s and early 40s. And so there was some experience with fluoride being very, very effective in terms of suppressing human fertility, but also in terms of inducing a state of bovine indifference, and which is why the Nazis got away with the treatment that they dished out on the Jews. So the methodology worked. Of course, they had to adjust the levels, and they had to make it more humane and more subtle. Part of the program to make it subtle was that they had to find an excuse as to why they would want to introduce a known poison into the water supply. And the excuse, the pretext, of course, was that it is good for our teeth, that it prevents the development of caries. And that's, of course, complete nonsense, which we now know. But at that time, of course, we did not know. We just trusted the authorities, and it took quite a while to get to this knowledge. In terms of solutions, obviously, every solution would have to consider why the governments of the world and the international community would resort to such horrendous methods of population control? What would compel them to do this? So why did they not go, openly, like China has done since 1978, and legislate population control? Well, that has not been possible in free democracies for three reasons. In 1945, there was no technology developed for contraception. It was still in its incipient stages. And at most, about a third of the population in the cities used contraceptives, and nobody in the countryside. So only a minority used contraceptives, had the knowledge, and of course the methods were more or less useless. Secondly, you have the democratic process that stood in the way. In democracies, if you have three candidates fighting for office, and one of them runs on a platform of population control, well, that person, you can bet, will never be elected. It would be the others who promised the sky and the moon that would be elected. So they could not tackle this democratically, openly, because of the nature of our political system and democracy. And third, of course, the religious authorities, and especially the Catholic Church, did not approve of the use of contraceptives, and of course abortion to this date remains a big no-no for the Catholic Church and many other religious authorities. So these proved to be insurmountable obstacles that stood in the way of legislation, and the governments at the time had no choice but to circumvent these obstacles, and they did so by creating the United Nations and by making population control a matter of international security prerogative. And from that moment on, legislatures and national authorities washed their hands clean of this issue, put it entirely in the lap of the United Nations, and asked them to run with it. So any kind of directive that comes from the United Nations is imposed on nation states, democratic or not, and every country that is a member of the United Nations, and of course 193 countries to date are members, virtually every country in the world is a member of the UN, they have to comply with directives of the United Nations. So the United Nations coordinates this great agenda of depopulation, which is global. And of course, that could only be done this way. You would have to have a neutral agency so that it can be imposed on everybody. So this has been done by mutual coercion, mutually agreed upon, which was the only way of doing it.
Global depopulation. So I just wanted to share a couple of stats from your book. By 1960, fluoridation had reached 50 million, which was 30% Americans. And today, over 230 million, or 75% of the population, is fluoridated.
Yes, that's correct. And that is the case because fluoridation is extremely effective, and it is the cheapest method known to date to undermine human fertility. It costs pennies per person per year. In the meantime, other methods have been developed, and I discuss those in my books. But let's focus on fluoride. Fluoride continues to be widely used because it is the cheapest, and because everybody drinks water. Just think about it. How can you undermine human fertility across the board? What method could you possibly use that reaches into everybody's home? Well, clearly, water reaches into everybody's home. And this is why they settled for fluoridation and delivered through water, at least in developed countries where the infrastructure allowed the distribution of fluoride within the water system. Of course, to be able to distribute fluoride within the water system means that you have a well-developed water infrastructure, that you have water treatment plants, and so on. So this was only possible in developed countries with a well-developed infrastructure. And that is why water fluoridation is specific to developed countries, whereas developing countries or poorer countries have settled on salt fluoridation. Since they don't have, for most part, many of the cities, the smaller towns, and so on, do not have water treatment plants. So the methodology has been dictated by the level of development of every nation, and of course by the budgets available to this project. And of course, the poorer the country, the less money available for this. In the case of the United States, it's very, very interesting because once I published my book in 2011, my first book on the subject, Water, Salt, Milk, Killing Our Unborn Children, what I did, before I put it out there, I made copies on CDs, and I went to the nearest city, which was Claremont, Florida. I was in exile at that time. And I gave a copy to every parish priest and a Protestant leader in the community and at every church that I could find. And next, I mailed copies to several organizations in the world that oppose fluoridation and several Catholic organizations, to the Vatican itself, and so on. So before I released it on the internet, I took this step because I knew that immediately after I put it on the internet, it will be censored, since we don't have control over the internet. It is the global infrastructure of control that has the internet at its fingertips. And shortly after, 1 week after I gave my CD to the church leaders in Claremont, Florida, the President of the United States flew into Claremont, which is a small town, on an unannounced visit. Obviously, in order to appease the population there, they would have, informed the higher authorities of what is happening, and Obama flew immediately, 1 week after, into Claremont, Florida, to appease the population. Now, what has happened, behind closed doors, I don't know. But shortly after, Obama announced that the levels of fluoride will be reduced from 1.5 parts per million to 0.5 parts per million, which is, a lot less devastating on the body. So ever since, the water levels of fluoridation in the United States have been lowered to a far less devastating levels than was previously the case. And my guess is, judging by the new methods now being developed, and of course the newest one being GMOs, genetically modified organisms, water fluoridation is on its way out because it is being replaced by genetically modified organisms and other methods, but mainly by GMOs. And it is being replaced because the devastation that it does to the human body is now proven by medical research, research that was mostly done outside of Western countries because it has been heavily restricted in Western countries. So we have now a data bank of research coming from China, India, and so on. So mostly from the countries that have not used covert methods, chemical methods of fluoridation or of fertility control. And these can no longer be suppressed, and the reason they can no longer be suppressed is because of the World Wide Web. Now we have at our disposal the ability to communicate internationally, at no cost at all. So it has been impossible, it has become impossible for the authorities, be they global or national, to suppress this information. So that is where we are now. Fluoride is slowly on its way out. GMOs are going to replace it in the hope that it will be a lot less harsh on the body.
It is still, still a problem though, because as you said, it's in table salt, it's also in milk, it's in sodas, it's in food that gets contaminated by the water. So we're still receiving a heavy dosage of fluoride.
Yes?
I think that's very important, real quick, guys. I think it's very important to touch on the fact that this stuff is intentionally added to salts and other foodstuffs. A lot of people are not aware of that information, even including myself to some degree. I mean, I've researched it a bit, largely because of your body of work, Kevin, and I think that's a very important thing for the public to try to understand is why are they adding this stuff to our food, and what foods are they adding it to?
It is now, the use of fluoride now is endemic. Of course, they were forced, if you want to put it this way, the authorities were forced to put fluoride in just about everything. Why? Because the resistance to fluoridation became so great, especially on the West Coast, where people are more enlightened, and they could no longer push it and force it on the people. So since they could not put it in the water they had to find ways to put it in food products, beverages, and so on. So now fluoride is endemic. You find it in just about every milk product and beverage that goes through the
And what are we talking about here raw chemically? What are they adding to our milk, for example, or to the salt? And how do they add these things in? How do they add it into our food?
Well, there are various methods. Of course, the way they add it in the water is fairly well known. But how they're adding it to salt in North America, salt is not necessarily fluoridated. Although I wouldn't be surprised to find out that many of the agro giants are using fluoridated salt without our knowledge. However, the countries that do use fluoridated salt, which is all of Latin America, they do it through a process that is identical to the iodization of salt. So if they iodize the salt, they also fluoridate it, and they do it in the same plants by the same method. So you have now all of about 350 million people, at least in Latin America, that use fluoridated salt. To what extent it is added to our industrial food, that is not well known yet. But what else? Yes.
I'd certainly say 350 million people affected by this is something to cause concern in the international community.
Well, it's actually a lot more than 350 million. Salt fluoridation now is ubiquitous, really, throughout Latin America. Now, in milk products, how do they do that? That is a process that was developed by the British, by an organization called the Borrow Foundation. That's BORROW. And they've been promoting milk fluoridation on behalf of the World Health Organization, and they've done this since the 1950s. In 1950, the World Health Organization paid a Swiss gynecologist to produce, false research on the benefits of salt fluoridation. And another Swiss doctor, a pediatrician by the name of Ziegler, to produce false research on the benefits of fluoridated milk. And that happened in 1952. So ever since 1952, the World Health Organization has been pushing the milk fluoridation onto countries, throughout the world. And you find it now in Europe and North America, in milk. You find it in ice cream. You find it in yogurt. You find it in just about everything. More so, I must say, in Europe than in North America. Why? Because in North America, most communities receive water fluoridation, and that is more than enough. And of course, it's present in our in our dental products, and that means that we are exposed at all times to fluoride in our systems. The fluoridating agent that is used for milk fluoridation, it depends on the country. Some use calcium fluoride, some use sodium fluoride, some use disodium monofluorophosphate, and others still use disodium silicofluorides. And the concentrations also vary. They vary from 0.2% to 2.2%. And of course, the types of milk vary, whether it's pasteurized, sterilized, or powdered milk. It depends on the country. But you can be sure that it is here. It is here. It is ubiquitous. It is endemic.
And we were seeing fluoride added to, what was it, Eugene? Baby formulas and...
Well, they specifically add it in water that's targeted with children. I mean, it literally has a picture of a baby, an infant, crawling, on this picture, and they're giving fluoride intentionally. General Mills is the company that does that. I think there's several others as well. Certainly General Mills has been involved in the poisoning of America and beyond with their foodstuffs, and obviously they're in conjunction with people like the Food and Drug Administration. You've got the ADA out there that obviously is a culprit in all of this. And I would, when we say, Kevin, that this agenda was forced. These countries were forced to do this. Do you see, when we talk about here tonight, you mentioned that this is a method of peacekeeping initially, this depopulation agenda. And,
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense, although I think that that's controversial in the sense that a lot of people out here think that there is an agenda behind the scenes which may be satanic. It may have all these other, connotations we may attach to it, but it's sinister. And how are we seeing that? And through your research, how does that corroborate in your research? What do you see underlying all?
This is a very, very good question, and I can understand why people are, suspicious, and I was too at the beginning until I looked into it deeply. It started with the best of intentions. It started, of course, in 1941 with the Atlantic Charter, when the enlightened countries of the world said, from now on, let's organize our international infrastructure so that we don't come to blows and we don't come to war. And of course, Roosevelt was a big player. He put his imprint on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was, at the basis of the United Nations organization. And what did they want to do? What they advocated, with this new change of direction on the international arena was to no longer engage in war and land grabs. So in political language, they said the abandonment of the use of force and of ambitions for territorial aggrandizement. What else did they advocate? Global cooperation to secure better economic and social conditions for all, and freedom from fear and want. So this started, with the best of intentions, with the noblest of intentions. Of course, they did not know what they're getting themselves into. They did not know what the effects of chronic low poisoning over generations would lead to. The scientific data was just not available. There was no research done. There was no experience. And once the data started coming in the 70s, and it showed how destructive it was on the human body, immediately European countries abandoned water fluoridation. They switched to other methods, salt fluoridation, BPA, and so on. But they abandoned the use of silicofluoride for one thing, and they used natural fluoride, which is a lot less toxic because it does not have trace elements of other poisons in it, which silicofluorides do. But it started, with the best of intentions, and of course they chose the path of least resistance because they, due to the obstacles I mentioned, they couldn't legislate it.
I've got to say that redefines, the road to hell being paved with good intentions. And so, where we're going now is these, some people abandon it because they clearly, understood the health detriments and these adverse health effects, which are, there's so many of them. And other entities and factions sought to embrace this type of weaponry ultimately and engage it on the people.
There is a huge battle, between the extreme elements, if you want, within government and the international community, and the softer elements. The extreme element says basically that we have to engage, in whatever method is available because the overpopulation problem has become now the greatest threat to humanity, and any means are justified because we have to, come hell or high water, we have to reduce the global population. We have to halt it first, at most at 9 billion, and we have to reverse it. Another reason why the methodology has not stopped is because once they set on this path, they knew that they were committing themselves to a multi-generational effort. Why? Well, the demographic transition that they seek to achieve, that is, to halt the population by reducing the number of children per family, and then to reduce the global population by continuing, this low fertility, which is obviously engineered and is not natural. They did not know. Well, they knew that this is a multi-generational effort, and that once they start, they cannot stop. Now, in addition to that, having reached level 3 or 4 of the demographic transition, which is where we're at now in developing countries. What does that mean? At this level, it means that now we have more old people than we have young people. So our population is stabilizing, but now we have an inverted population pyramid. We have too many old people at the top and too few young people at the bottom to support, this age population. So now the onus is on reducing or eliminating or speeding up the death of all these old people, having been extremely successful at limiting the number of young people born into the world, of children born into the world. So now we have this inverted population pyramid, and the burden of the old on the social infrastructure is so great that every government now is collapsing, especially those with very generous social benefits, as European countries are or have been. So now they're engaging methods to reduce the old, just as they have engaged methods to limit the number of young born into the world. So fluoridation has been used and is being used to limit the number of people born into the world. Chemtrails, for instance, is a method used to speed up the death of old people, so that those inverted pyramids of our social structures do not collapse society. So they've gotten themselves into terrible trouble because they did not know what the effects, how spread the effects, the direct effects, the indirect effects, and the unintended consequences of interfering with natural human growth, natural population growth would lead to. There was no experience. They went into this fully without any experience. And once having caused the problem, now there is no going back. Now they have to solve these problems, otherwise we're all dead. And they're forced now to commit, more and more odious crimes because they are fully engaged, and also because nobody dares, nobody has the courage, and nobody has the freedom to come out and say, stop. This is killing us. This methodology is not working. Our societies are becoming more and more tyrannical. We're committing crimes against humanity that make the Nazis blush. And yet, if we don't do it, we're all dead. Within a few years, global society is going to come to complete collapse and to conflict, to universal conflict. So they've opened this can of worms, and now there is no going back. Nobody has the courage or the freedom to say, first of all, to admit what they have been doing, because in order to change the methodology from covert to overt, so from covert methods of poisoning to overt legislation, somebody has to come out and say, well, this is what we've been doing so far. This is why, because we've been engaged in all of these covert chemical methods of population control since 1945, now the population is going to peak at 9 billion by 2040. But in order to change, in order to continue to pursue these demographic objectives, they have to come out and admit that they have employed covert chemical and biological fertility control methods that have caused, tremendous damage to our genetic and intellectual endowment, and that have prevented the birth of 2 billion children. So they have to admit to crimes against humanity of unprecedented proportions. And who's going to do that? Who has the courage? Do you think any one of our elected politicians are going to do that? No. Well, they're waiting for somebody like me. They're waiting for an outsider to rescue them from the hell that they've ended up in. And by these miraculous circumstances, here I am.
Unbelievable. That is unbelievable. I just want to thank you for that, because so many people have tried to come after the fluoride issue. And the thing is the methodologies of mind control, I would say, are so prevalent and so effective that they're working. They're keeping us docile, and this apathetic mindset and this anti-diligence movement that we have out there. And, what would you say about the pineal gland, how this affects the pineal gland? And after, maybe if you get into that, is it possible, we know the function of the pineal gland is a multi-layered, very special thing that we are able to utilize and use. It's been attacked. Certainly fluoride seems to be the major culprit in this attack through lots of research, including our own, and I'm sure that you have something to say on that. Is it possible that we, through a detox method, and then an awakening, if we begin to utilize the function of this pineal gland collectively to a higher degree, is it possible to have an outcome in this from your perspective that could, obviously there's going to have to be some tearing down of the infrastructure and things. From my own perspective, I think that's a no-brainer. But what do you see happening with all this stuff?
Well, listen, fluoride is an endocrine disruptor. It does damage not just to the pineal gland, but to every gland in the human body. So it affects, the transfer of energy at the molecular level, and it impedes and damages every function of the human body, every normal function of the human body. You say, is there a way to protect ourselves? Well, sure, yes. We can drink nothing but water treated through reverse osmosis. We can stay away from industrial foods and just buy organic and so on. But you would have to be so diligent, and it would be so difficult. You have to be so choosy that you would be spending, half of your life and half of your money pursuing healthy foods. Now, I tell you, the only way that we are going to protect our children from the onslaught of poisons that have been deliberately fed, inserted into our food and water supply and beverages, and now even into the air, is by rising up as one and fighting for our lives, because this is what it boils down to here. We're fighting for, not only are we fighting for our children's lives, we're fighting for the continuation of our genetic lines. Because that is what they're shutting down. They're shutting down one genetic line after another. And in the developing world, in the Western world, 20 to 25%, that's almost a quarter of the population, has been shut out of the cycle of procreation. 25% of Western women do not have children throughout their childbearing years. And they don't have children because many of them are infertile, or their husbands are infertile, or they have subfertile sperm, or due to the psychosocial and economic pressures that have been engineered in order to undermine the family unit, and on top of undermining our reproductive system. So we are facing an enemy here that is coming at us from every direction, and if we think that we can, isolate ourselves, cocoon ourselves, on organic farms, and drink, pure water from the mountain streams, then we're living in an illusion, because this will buy us time. It's true. It's much better than continuing to eat their poisonous food. And it is necessary that people do mind what they eat and what they drink. That is, it's crucial. It'll buy us time. But unless we rise as one and we force political change at the national and at the international level, and the only way to do that is by spelling out the truth and being, fearless, we will never succeed in protecting our children and our genetic lines. It is just a pipe dream. The only way we can do this is by politically, actively fighting for our lives.
Now, Kevin, you brought that up in your chemical and biological depopulation book. I think it was page 174 that you had the next steps to a global revolution. Is that what you're talking about with us raising up as one?
Yes. First of all, I believe now, having acquired even more knowledge on the subject than I had when I wrote the book, I believe that we can destroy this policy simply by spelling out the truth, by letting out the truth, letting governments know that we know what is going on, that their entire methodology of concealment, misdirection, and lying does no longer work, that we know exactly what is being done to us and how they're accomplishing this. And in so doing, we rob them of the possibility of pretending to be innocent, for one thing, and secondly, of being able to marshal their own ranks, into this coalition of the unwilling, as I call it, because I can tell you that nobody in the system is happy with this. The people who are being forced to do this, which is the intelligence agencies and the medical agencies and so on, these people hate what they're doing. They are stuck in hell. But their hands are tied by confidentiality agreements, by contractual agreements, and by international agreements. And if they breathe a word about it, they'll end up in prison on charges of treason and so on. So they've been waiting for, and hoping and praying to God that the people will smarten up and will realize what is happening, and that we come to their rescue, because the people inside the system. Sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Kevin. What do you envision happening here? I mean, when we talk about we have to fight for our lives, what does that look like to you? And how are we going to, ultimately we would shoot for a peaceful reconciliation to this if we're doing it ultimately for our children,
we have to start issuing open letters to our leaders, to our military leaders, to our scientific leaders, to our political leaders, telling them that we know what is happening, and that unless they change course immediately, then we will not shy away from engaging in civil war. We're fully within our right to defend ourselves, to defend our families, to defend our genetic lines, and we have the law on our side. We have the moral high ground, and of course we have the instinct of survival on our side. So they can no longer, we have to rob them of the possibility of pretending ignorance, for one thing, and secondly, to put it in their face and stick it in their eyes that we have the law on our side.
I love that.
They can close ranks all they want and, attempt to lie, but they no longer do that. Let me tell you, they're on the defensive now. They're running and hiding. They are now quiet.
What was your status as a political exile? Well, how did that actually come into being, and which country were you exiled from?
So I'm Canadian. I live in Canada since 1985. I'm originally from Europe. I was born in Romania. Then my parents immigrated to Germany, and at the age of 19, I came to Canada on my own, looking for the great outdoors. And how did it come to be? In 2012, the beginning of the year, after my fourth arrest, I would still not shut up about this. I continued to publish and and reveal immoral and divisive policies at the national and international level. And this time, the government of Canada no longer hid behind the criminal code, because before they always charged me wrongfully in order to hide their political intentions behind the criminal code. But this time, having realized that I wouldn't back off, that I'm too tough a cookie to crack, they issued a warning through my lawyer at that time. His name was John Oliver. And they said, Kevin, unless Kevin ceases and desists all of his human rights activists and political activists, and he shuts up about these issues, we're going to arrest him again, and we're going to make new charges. Of course, they didn't specify what charges. And I responded to that. I said, come and get me. I said, our children's rights and future are not for sale. I will not compromise, and if you want to arrest me, come and get me. So I knew they were coming to get me, and I made sure that during that time I wasn't hanging around home too much. I wasn't home anymore. I haven't been in my home for 3.5 years. I was with sureties, with people who bailed me out of jail. And I made sure that I wasn't home during the day, and it was a smart move on my part, because around 9 p.m. On I think it was the 12th of February 2012, they came to the house where I lived with my sureties to arrest me with an arrest warrant. Well, I happened to be visiting other friends, and my friends here let me know that the police came to arrest me. And all I had on me was $100, the clothes on my back, and my car. So immediately I jumped in the car. My friends that I was visiting were kind enough to lend me some money. And I started driving at 9 p.m., so in the evening, I started driving out of town. And as I attempted to get on the highway, every exit to the highway was guarded by a police cruiser. They were waiting for me. So I retreated immediately. I avoided the highway 401, which is the one that crosses Canada from east to west. And I headed out north using, secondary roads. Lo and behold, they had put up roadblocks to stop me as well. I assume it was for me, but because it was night, I could see the lights, so I bypassed those. And I had GPS, so it was easy for me to bypass those. And I had a very good car as well. And I did. I made it out of the city. I made it past all their blocks. And then I stayed off the highways. I drove throughout the night. I stopped in Montreal where I had friends, and my friends helped me, lend me money. And then I continued driving east. I made it to an eastern province, to New Brunswick, and there I found a bed and breakfast close to the border, actually right on the border, And for the next day, I scouted the border to see where I could cross clandestinely. It was the terrible thing is that it was in the middle of February, and February, of course, is bitter cold in Canada. And I was waiting for milder weather, but it wasn't coming. It was minus 20 degrees Celsius, and the river was partially frozen. So my first attempt failed. I was using an inflatable air mattress, one of those air beds, because I couldn't find anything else. There were no boats for sale. It was wintertime. Nobody sells boats in Canada in winter. So all I could find was this inflatable bed, and I tried to cross on that. But because it was minus 25 degrees Celsius that night, the river was full of ice boulders, and these ice blocks tipped my my flotation device, and I fell into the river in the middle of it, and I almost died. I barely made it out alive, and of course I made it out of the river, without my boots and whatnot, and then I had to walk for 1 mile to make it to the bed and breakfast. So by the time I made it to the bed and breakfast, I was like an icicle, and my toes were all frozen, and I nearly lost a couple of toes actually in the process due to frostbite. But luckily, next night the temperature rose to only minus 5 degrees Celsius. The ice had disappeared, and my second attempt succeeded. So I crossed into the U.S. that second night. I abandoned my Mercedes at the bed and breakfast. It's still there, probably to this day. And I swam across. I used public transportation, Greyhound buses and so on, and made it all the way down to Florida, where my sister lives, and I have family and friends. So I had a support system there. And for the next 3 months, I kept a low profile. I did not use the internet. I did not let anybody know where I was and so on. But what I did is I worked on applications to the international courts, where I sought protection from the international courts, from the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, France, from the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights in Washington, D.C., and from the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland. So I sent my applications for protection, and I sued the governments of Canada and the UK at all these 3 international courts. And I sought protection under an instrument called interim measures. And I sought protection for myself and for my family back home. Of course, even though the international courts remained silent, I knew that behind the scenes something would have happened, because nobody touched me in the United States. The American government left me alone. There was no secret agents coming to visit my sister's house, no police and so on. I was not extradited back to Canada, even though Canada had issued 3 arrest warrants. And I suspect they asked the American government to hand me over, but the Americans didn't. So I'm grateful to the American government for this. At the same time, what the American government did, which is extraordinary, they knew that I was using public phones to communicate with my wife back home. So they came and removed the 2 public phones that I was using, which were the only 2 public phones that I could reach on my bicycle. Obviously, I didn't have transportation. And so they removed 2 public phones. They pulled them out of their routes and never brought them back. Also, what they did is they went to the public library that I was using in Claremont, and they've fiddled with the software so that I couldn't attach attachments to any of my Hotmail account emails. And of course, the inconvenience was imposed on all of the other users at the same time. But this is, I know, the Americans proceeded in a very civilized manner, if you want. They isolated me, electronically. They contained me, from a distance without depriving me of my freedom, as my own country has done, Canada, probably on the advice or on the request of the United Kingdom, because my battle began in the UK. So the Americans sheltered me, and I'm very grateful to the American government for that. But while I was in the United States, I continued my research, and this is when I realized that the program of surveillance and censorship that I had uncovered in the UK was merely an offshoot of the global depopulation program, global depopulation policy. And I published my first book on this subject at the end of August 2012, and that book, as you all know, is called Water, Salt, Milk, Killing Our Unborn Children. And from that moment on, of course, I became, persona non grata for every country in the world. Why? How can I prove this? Well, while I was in the States during that time of 10 months of exile, I applied for political asylum in five different countries. And the countries that I chose deliberately as being outside of the sphere of influence of the Western world. So I applied to Venezuela, Bolivia, Costa Rica, Argentina, and for good measure, 2 European countries, Switzerland and Norway. And lo and behold, most of these countries didn't even respond, did not even acknowledge my application, because of course they are, fully implicit in the and involved in the depopulation program in their own countries. And the last thing they wanted is somebody like me there to spill the beans. Norway started the process, the application process, and then a month later, without further ado, no more communication, completely shut out. And that is a country, known for its sort of human rights protections and so on. Switzerland, again, they send me a phony result to their so-called, to my application. They made it sound like it was a misunderstanding that I was applying for economic asylum rather than political asylum. So this is how they washed their hands off me. So every country in the world that I appealed to turned its back on me, and of course I knew that there was nowhere to go. This is a global program. You can't immigrate anywhere. I wasn't going to stay in the United States because the United States is, of course, one of the drivers of this, one of the driving forces of this program. And the reason why I also had to come back to Canada is to claim my children, my property, because I wasn't going to leave my children behind. And to fight this from within. I wanted to force the Canadian system to face this, and I guess I reckon that Canada is as good as any country. We have nowadays we can't speak of civil rights and of human rights and civil liberties that don't exist anywhere in the world anymore. If you touch upon the matrix of control, this international matrix, which is the greater depopulation globalization program, because one is the obverse side of the other. Globalization and depopulation go hand in hand. And so I knew that I had to come back to Canada and force the Canadian government to face this issue. And I knew that they would arrest me immediately, and that's exactly what they did. I returned to Canada in December 12, 2012, and they arrested me at the border. But I should mention that before handing myself over at the border, I stopped in Washington, D.C. And why? I thought I have one chance of perhaps, I was hoping, of receiving asylum at the Vatican. So I wrote in advance to the Vatican embassy, which is called a nunciature, by the way. They don't use the word embassy; they use the word nunciature. And I wrote to Archbishop Vigano, who is the ambassador of the Vatican in Washington, D.C., or the nuncio of the Vatican in Washington, D.C. Received no response. Nevertheless, I thought I'm going to go there in person, knock on the door, and ask for asylum. And I did. So I went to Washington, D.C. by bus, dragged my suitcase there in front of the embassy, knocked on the door. A nun opened the door. The moment she saw me, it was like she had seen the devil. She knew exactly who I was. She wouldn't let me even cross inside the embassy, let alone listen to what I had to say. She even refused to take my letter that I had prepared, for Archbishop Vigano, for the ambassador, and they just chased me away. So that confirmed to me, the involvement of the Vatican in the depopulation program, or at least its tacit consent and approval. So having exhausted the last possibility for receiving political asylum, I then hopped on the bus again and handed myself over at the border in Canada. And I was arrested immediately, brought back by a police cruiser a few hours later to the city of Kingston, and incarcerated for the next 9 months. I was held in pre-trial detention. And I could write a book on these 9 months alone, because what happened during those 9 months is truly worthy of a Hollywood movie. For the first 3 months, or nearly 3 months, for the first 75 days, I engaged in a hunger strike. I refused to eat. So I did not eat for 75 days, and the fact that I'm alive today is nothing short of a miracle. Because I'm 40, at that time I was 47 years old. I'm 48 years old now, so I'm not a young a man. And the fact that I was able to go entirely without food for 75 days is a miracle. I lost during this time, during the 75 days of hunger strike, I was continuously in isolation. I was kept in isolation and under 24-hour surveillance in a cell with a plexiglass wall. And I lost 28% of my body weight, or 55 pounds. And of course, my heart started to sort of give out towards the end of it. And I knew that was my only physical weakness. There's a history of heart problems in my family, and if I don't stop, I would die. And of course, the authorities were hoping that I would continue and I would die, and this is why they refused any visits by the International Red Cross. They refused to. They shut out the phones, so I could not use any phones for the first 2 weeks. Then they refused to offer me a lawyer. So for the first 4 weeks, I did not have access to a lawyer. They tried to break me down, by refusing to give me blankets. So they kept me in continuous cold for the entire 75 days. It was in the middle of the winter. They shut up the hot water, so I did not have hot water for 75 days. I had nothing but cold water. And of course, I wasn't eating. And yet I survived 75 days of hunger strike without hot water and in bitter cold, sleeping on a concrete block because there is no mattress. They don't give you any mattress when you are in isolation, in solitary confinement. They refuse you blankets, and that's standard for everybody. Mattresses, and that's standard for everybody. So they denied me, absolutely any and all comforts. They denied me access to the Red Cross, even though I'm entitled to that, and I requested it, and I appealed to higher authorities after about a month or so, but I was ignored. But I made my point, and I specified what the reasons of my hunger strike were, and there were three. I said I will refuse food until such time as I am reunited with my children, for whom I had been separated for more than 2 years at that time. Now it's nearly 3 years. Until the government of Canada treats me as a political prisoner and not as a common criminal, and until the government of Canada and the greater international community stops its covert methods of population control, of depopulation. In other words, until they stop poisoning the people and employ legislative means like China has done. So for 75 days I was in living in these abject conditions and survived. When I said, okay, I'm done with the hunger strike, they moved me into the main dorm, the general population dorm, which houses up to 34 inmates. And they had inserted a team of 3 undercover cops. One of them was an experienced undercover police officer. One was a military scientist, and the third one was, support system. And for the next 3 months, they tried to work me, psychologically, to give up, to plead guilty to anything, so that they could justify my incarceration. And they're trying to fill my head with stupid ideas of, why depopulation is occurring. And of course, I didn't buy into any of their nonsense. And despite of these conditions, I wrote my last book on the depopulation program in jail during those 9 months. So my book, Killing Us Softly, Causes and Consequences of the Global Depopulation Policy, was written entirely in jail under these conditions, during the hunger strike, during these 3 months of psychological coercion, and then during the last 2 months, they put me into what do they call that? High protective custody, because at one point I was fed up with the undercover team, and I exposed them to the authorities. I said, I know who these people are, and I said, this is a breach of my constitutional rights, and it is also a security threat. And I said, I ask to be, either these people disappear or I'm moved to a safe place. So they put me into into protective custody. But in order to humiliate me, they put me in the wing that is reserved for pedophiles and people who have beaten their wives and abused their kids. So for the next 2 months, the last 2 months of my incarceration, I was in that wing under a 23.5-hour lockdown. I was allowed outside only for 20 minutes a day. And in my cell, to their credit, by that time they had put somebody who was there, to monitor me 24 hours a day. And for about a month, they also put a psychologist to sort of test me and to see what kind of man I was, and probably to write a report on my continuing refusal to acquiesce. So all of they denied me any kind of lawyer, and finally, after about 4 months, they gave me a government lawyer who was completely co-opted, and I fired her, after 2 weeks. And not only was I for 9 months in pretrial detention, but I had to defend myself against all the charges, the 21 charges, all of them false, in court. And of course, I had to do all the legal work on my own under these conditions. And without access to the Criminal Code of Canada, because they denied me access to the books, which is, again, another right that inmates have. Luckily, one of the social workers lent me his book, so for about 2 weeks I had access to the Criminal Code of Canada for about 2 hours a day, on some days, not always. So I was able to learn the law and study the Criminal Code and defend myself in court. And I beat them in court on the first day of trial by filing a motion for stay of proceedings on the grounds of non-disclosure. Why? They had refused to disclose the material evidence. So they held me for 9.5 months. And of course, this was not the first incarceration. This was the 6th. And for more than 2.5 years, they had refused me access to the Crown Disclosure, it's called. So I was, for all intents and purposes, being incarcerated under the same conditions as a military tribunal, or as a tyrannical country, a country without the rule of law. And nevertheless, I beat them in court on the grounds of non-disclosure. So they released me then that same day. There's no record, of my incarcerations. There's nothing published in newspapers, nothing. They just released me in the street, once again for the 6th time without a penny to my name, and completely, not only they released me without a penny to my name, they imposed a 10-year, what is it called? Sorry, the legal term is casing right now. I'm not allowed to go anywhere near my family, my children, and my wife for the next 10 years without any explanation whatsoever, in order to break me down, emotionally, psychologically, knowing that my strength comes from my children, and I'm making all these sacrifices for my children, first and foremost, and obviously for my fellow men, because this is an issue that concerns every human being on the planet. So they've tried everything possible to break me.
Then how on earth are they able to tell you to stay away from your family and your children?
They've done this for the last almost 3 years now. I have not seen my children for 3 years. I have not been able to sleep in my own bed for 3 years because I can't go anywhere near my house. They've shut me out of my own bank accounts. They have broken, they have violated the most fundamental rights in the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms that Canada abides by, which is,
I've got to say it. I'm ready to door knock this stuff, Kevin. I am ready to take this to their front door, buddy. I cannot stand to hear this out of you. And my God, your testimony is absolutely, all the things that you've endured and persevered through are such an inspiration, I think, for anybody who would hear this broadcast. Clearly, this is something that should not have been done, and so it really raises an eyebrow for people to bring people's attention to this issue. Is so very vital. What a stellar role that you play here, honestly. And so, I would really, what do you see? What's the way that we're going to be able to raise mass awareness about this, Kevin?
All we have to do is we have to speak the truth. We have to spread this, the material evidence that I've put together in my 2 books alone is more than enough. And nobody dares to challenge that. The authorities have gone, they're hiding, they've put their tails between their legs because they know that they can put together, the most intelligent team of scientists, and they could not possibly dispute the evidence that I put together in my 2 books. Chemical and biological depopulation, and the second one, which is Killing Us Softly, Causes and Consequences of the Global Depopulation Policy. Why? They can't dispute them because not only do I use multidisciplinary scientific evidence, demographic evidence, legal evidence, and so on. I use, at least 6 or 7 different fields of knowledge. But in my second book, what I do is I put the policy in historical perspective so that nobody can deny it. So I compare and analyze, the benefits and the methodologies of various countries in the world, and I show, how India, for instance, has tackled their overpopulation problem through coerced surgical sterilization, how China has done it through legislation, through the one-child policy, and then how the West has done it through a covert chemical sterilization. And when you have these, these methodologies side by side, and I compare the numbers and I compare the methods, nobody can dispute it. They have gone into hiding now. They're scared for their lives because they know that now the truth is out. The cat is out of the bag, to use this metaphor, and they cannot put it back in. I've broken through all of their systems and checks to conceal this great secret. So now all we have to do now is to put this in their faces and to scream from the rooftops and to rise as one. We have to form, groups, community groups, and we have to go to our police headquarters, hand our police commissioners and sheriffs, whatever you call them in your country, the evidence, and say, either you are with us, or you are with the eugenicists and the genocidal governments now in control. Once that happens, once we break their ranks, because these are ranks of the unwilling, they are left without this protection, because now the elite, if you want, who let me say this now, they are doing this out of desperation, not because they want us dead. It's because they know that unless the overpopulation problem is tackled, we're all dead anyway. So they're doing this out of pure desperation, not because they're monsters. But unless and until we tell them in no uncertain terms that we will not tolerate this, and that the truth is out, and that they can no longer rely on the 9% to buffer them from the 90%, they will not back off. Of course, they will also not back off until we provide them with an alternative, which is why I'm saying the alternative is, my own principles for one thing, and to make a long story short, without having to go into the details of what the own principles are about. I provide, a new social economic solution to these geopolitical problems that we face and to these demographic problems that we face. And one thing that we have to do is we have to implement a policy of family control, limiting family size, and we have to do it globally. And depending on the country you're in, now us in the West having been subjected to fluoridation and other methods of fertility control for 68 years. And now, since our populations have been stabilized for the past 10 years, and our TFR, our total fertility rates, are below replacement level, now we don't really need a one-child policy. We can do here just fine with a two-children policy, and this would be perfectly acceptable to the vast majority. Even the most conservative religious people will accept this, given the alternative of global mayhem, conflict, environmental devastation, mutual nuclear annihilation. God knows what awaits us if we don't tackle this. So we have to compel them to change course and provide them with the alternative, and to show them that we are capable of understanding the issues, and they can no longer use the excuse that we are a bunch of dummies who are incapable of tackling and understanding global issues. If I could do it, what was I before? I was a professional writer. Yes, I'm a pretty smart fellow. I'm not an idiot. But I had no involvement whatsoever with politics, certainly no knowledge of geopolitics, certainly no knowledge of demographic issues. I have never been, privy to any kind of government organization involved even tangentially with the globalization depopulation program. And yet I was able to unravel, their deepest and darkest secrets, along with their methodology, completely from the outside within 2 years' time. And, despite all of the roadblocks that I've raised and the hell that I've created in my life. If I could do it under these circumstances, why in the world wouldn't the rest of the population be able to grasp the realities? This is not rocket science. These are fairly simple issues to grasp, and people will get it. People will get it, especially if it is presented, in clear terms, especially if the media is engaged to make this the number one public issue, because it is the number one international security prerogative, and everything depends on it. If the education system gets engaged and is going to be working on all pistons, putting this information out there and educating the public in no time at all, then we can have a change of course from covert methods, which are immoral, divisive, and eugenic and genocidal, to legislative methods, which are humane and respectful of our rights and liberties, and will preserve not only our dignity as human beings, but our democratic checks and balances and our rights and liberties, because all of these have been abandoned in the pursuit of this greater and dire geopolitical agenda. So there is a way. It depends.
So basically, it's the people for the people. It's not, any. I just wanted to touch base on. You had sent letters to leaders to stop this depopulation measure. What kind of results or what kind of responses, if any, did you receive from them?
There have been no open responses, but I'm telling you, behind the scenes, everything is in turmoil. This is why, as a result of my work, directly as a result of my work, the Vatican has changed its Vicar of Christ. They've canned the previous Pope, and they've put in place now this Pope, Pope Francis, who is a wonderful human being, by the way. And what has Pope Francis been doing since? Well, he is ripping the entire church structure apart and reforming everything. Everything at the Vatican is being reformed. And what is his first message to the government? His first message was, be kind to the poor. His second message was to the flock, we have been concentrating for too long and with dire effects on matters that we should not have concentrated on, which is the use of contraceptives and abortion. Let's leave that aside and say let's concentrate on tending to the poor and leave these issues to secular governments. So they are changing course now. The Vatican is changing course. Secondly, the second sign that things are moving, Dr. Holdren, who is the science czar of the Obama administration, he now has issued statements saying that sort of muffled or, covered statements saying that we cannot solve our social problems and our geopolitical problems with scientific solutions. This is code for saying we have to abandon this covert chemical and biological poisoning methods for overt methods. So behind the scenes now, they are working day and night to find a replacement for these covert methods. So they're probably trying to rally other heads of state and the international community to come out, to muster the courage, and to find a subtle way and a soft landing to change course without having to necessarily declare, and admit to all of the crimes that have been committed in the process, so as not to anger the global population and cause instability and mayhem. And I understand this. I understand that they have to proceed cautiously, which is why they're allowing me to talk now. Now it's completely hands off. They're not arresting me. Nobody's harassing me anymore. And I can say things that none of our heads of state can say, and none of our Secret Service agents can say. Nobody at the CIA and NSA and CISAs or the British Secret Service can say. I can say. I'm the only person in the world who can speak about these things. And now everybody's counting on me, including our heads of state and our intelligence community, is counting on me and on people like you, Kimberlee, and like you, Eugene, and others who have the courage, to speak about this. They're counting on us to move the masses into action so that we can save them from the prison that they have built for themselves, because they have built for themselves a prison through this process of mutual coercion, mutually agreed upon. They've locked themselves in this prison. They've thrown away the key.
Absolutely. It just resonates with me 100%, Kevin, when you say that. I just want you to know because, excuse me, I just, these guys have it's gotten out of their own control. And if we can somehow exercise compassion in that, we're going to take it to their face and hold them accountable, it's basically what these guys need in order to, they're going to go down with the ship, and they're scared to death of what they've done.
And the ranks are breaking, Eugene. The ranks are breaking. You see in the news how Obama is asking military leaders, are you going to, are you willing, to shoot, civilians if need be, or to quell civil unrest if need be? And many of the military high-ranking officers and generals are saying no, go to hell.
Listen, I've talked to soldiers who have been asked that very question, and I'm very thankful for the fact that largely, I would say that they're largely awake per capita. They may be one of our most awake communities in the sense of this agenda that we're talking about here today. Absolutely.
Sure, they know. And listen, it is not going to work. The military, the history shows the military never, ever turns its arms against its own people. If they do it, it's going to be an isolated unit here and there, okay? And then the others are going to be just pounded by the remainder of the armed forces. So they're just desperate now. But something, we have to be very careful because we have to understand that they've been doing this, ultimately for our own good, even though they've used this, horrible, odious methods. But they've been doing this out of desperation. And unless we give them a way out, unless we provide them with a way out that is peaceful, we'll basically force them into a corner to go down, regardless how much bloodshed happens. So we have to be now more intelligent than our leaders. We have to be more compassionate than our leaders, and we have to be more wise than our leaders. And I know that we are, because ultimately the greatest knowledge and the greatest compassion and the greatest wisdom lies with the people. We are the repository of all knowledge. It's not the computers of the CIA and the NSA and all the data that they're collecting about us. It is this global consciousness where the repository, that is the repository of our wisdom and compassion. And I'm a firm believer that the humanity is endowed with more than is necessary to tackle this issue, in humane ways, in peaceful ways. I know that we can do it, and we don't need, this top-down imposition. We now have the mass communication tools and mass education tools, and the knowledge, and of course we have the data on the environment, which is we're destroying, and we have this clear data on population growth. We're at 7 billion now, and if we don't stop the population, natural population growth will double this 7 billion to 14 billion in just 25 to 30 years. Right now at 7 billion, 40% of us are, malnourished and living in abject poverty on $2 a day. How in the world are we going to support 14 billion? There's no way. We are already, way beyond nature's ability to regenerate. We are putting pressure on every biotope, and we are destroying the last systems, natural systems that are still functioning normally. So, that's happening at 7 billion. And to think that we can support 14 billion or 28 billion, by 2070, or 56 billion by 2100 by the end of the century, it's complete folly. Anybody who can add, 2 and 2 will come to the same conclusion that this is impossible. This is now do or die time, and whether we like it or not, regardless of what we believe, regardless of what our religious beliefs are and our norms and values, this is now international security, an international security prerogative, where if we don't all do our part, we're all dead.
So Kevin, you have several groups. Is that something that we should encourage people to become part of? Your Center of Global Consciousness, the People's Protection Court, freedomandeducation.org, and the OM, Our Mind, Voice, and Will of the 99%?
I would encourage people to concentrate on the Center of Global Consciousness, to talk about it. to mention that as as a new entity that could protect people's interests, global interests, as a neutral entity, if you want, as a people's entity, so that we, the people, have a place at the global governance table. And we can be appraised of the situation, of the facts, so that governments and the international community no longer buries the data and classifies it, that they give us the facts straight as they are, as horrible as they are, so that we can deal with them, as clear-headed and rational human beings. So I would say concentrate on the center of global consciousness. Talk about it. I don't want any money. We don't need money. What we need is people to speak up, to take matters in their own hands, to confront their legislators with this issue, and to make it clear that we know what is happening and they can no longer hide the facts. That's all it takes. We can turn this around in no time. If people stand up, speak about it, instead of emailing shopping lists and photographs of the children on their Facebook accounts, they should be emailing these issues, because a generation from now, there'll be no children left to email photographs of. So if people don't get this reality, this very simple and brutal reality, then we are the architects of our own demise, and we are responsible for forcing governments to act in a top-down way, to use macro economic solutions rather than us tackling this from the bottom up.
Other than the things of buying time, like using reverse osmosis water and making sure that you're using food that doesn't have fluoride or salt, what have you, is there any one book that you would say people need to read that we could highlight here? The Killing Us Softly book that has maybe step-by-steps of how they can reach out to their local authorities and put this into motion?
Yes, I think that both books are needed, Killing Us Softly and Chemical and Biological Depopulation. Chemical and Biological Depopulation, because towards the end of it, I show people how they need to muster the courage to confront their policymakers with the facts, and if need be, they have to be aggressive. And Killing Us Softly, Causes and Consequences of the Global Depopulation, it's necessary because it puts everything in historical perspective. So people will have a picture of how the world has run since 1945, and what governments have withheld from us, what vital information they have withheld from us that we need to know. And I've written them, as short as possible, especially the second one, Killing Us Softly. It's 110 pages, and in the paper format it's going to be 146 pages. But it's anybody can read it within 2 hours, and I've written it in very simple language so everybody can understand. There's no technical jargon, there's no fancy academic nonsense. It's plain English that everybody can understand. And I know that people get it, because everybody who reads that book, they say, "Wow. My eyes have been opened. I've come out of the dark. You've freed me from the cave." People get it.
I think it's so important, Kevin, that you put an emphasis on we all have different roles and functions in this fight, obviously, and some of us do have to actually get, for the lack of a better word, aggressive, to be able to get out here and get this stuff done. And so, you really just fire me up to do that. And I suspect that you're going to have that effect on many people. It's so good that you're getting this information out as much as you can. We're focusing on this year to really organize a movement of people to get behind all of this. Yeah, absolutely.
Eugene, I spared no punches. I say in my book, Chemical and Biological Depopulation, which was originally published as Water, Salt, Milk, Killing Our Unborn Children. Towards the end of the book, I say, people need to form groups, and you go to the homes of your elected officials, and if they don't change course, if they don't declare their allegiance to the people, then you arrest these people and hold them in detention until such time as they do. I'm sure it's not going to come to that, because we are dealing with rational human beings here. These are not animals. These are not criminals. These are not, people who have dedicated their lives to the devil. That's not the case. They're trying, their best, and they thought they're doing us a favor by preventing us from knowing, all these horrible facts. But now they know better because we've told them better. And some of us, yes, have to show courage. Obviously, some of us are at the forefront, and I happen to have, fallen into this role. It's not because I chose it. As I said, I'm 48 years old. I was never involved in, human rights activism. I'm not that kind of a person. But when they stepped on my toes, and when I realized uh, subsequently that, my children's lives are at stake and that their health is at stake, well, I'm telling you, if you as a parent, if you're not willing to lay down your life for your children, then you're not a parent. Then you're not a mother. You're not a father. You don't deserve those children. This is the way I see it. So the time has come to stop just paying lip service to our duties as citizens, as parents, and to act accordingly. And now we are being provided with the historical circumstances where we have to act accordingly. And if we don't, not only will we not have grandchildren to face, but if we happen to be lucky enough to have grandchildren to face, they're going to ask us the hard question: what have you done, grandfather or father, to protect our future? And if you're standing there in front of your children or grandchildren saying, I've done nothing, I've twiddled my thumbs, well, how do you think your grandchildren and children are going to view you? They're going to view you as a coward, and that is exactly how you must view yourself if you don't stand up at this time, at this historic time.
Yes, if we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem.
Yes, indeed it is the case. And we should, in a sense, consider ourselves fortunate that we live in such extraordinary times, because we are being provided here with an opportunity to turn our insignificant or, just humble individual lives into something that is truly of global proportions. And we as individuals now, not only do we have this opportunity, we are required to dedicate, our lives to this task. And nobody's asking us, to lay down our lives the way our fathers and forefathers have died in Flanders Fields, in the First World War, or in the air raids of the Second World War. That's not the case here. We're not being asked to be heroes. All we're being asked to do is to be decent human beings, to have, compassion for our fellow men, to abandon our false allegiances and our old ideologies and our stupid dogmas, and to face the harsh facts, that we're dealing with today. And as I like to say, to stand on the shoulders of giants and not hide in their shadows. We have to find solutions for today. We can't rely, on old books and old recipes, because old books and old recipes, they might give us, the sort of moral direction, but they're not going to have an action plan. Only we can do this now, because history has brought us to this point, and history demands from us action here and now.
Yeah, I think we have all felt this sense of urgency of what's going on right now, and for us to all find each other and be able to put a voice to this and call people into action. This is not about just saying, oh, this is unfortunate and, it's too bad that we've come to this point, and then just turn the other cheek. This is about all of us, moms, dads, brothers, sisters, neighbors, friends, getting the word out and being part of the solution. This is what we're asking everybody to do here. Kevin, I'm going to put up the links to all your books, to the groups and such toward the end of this conversation. And if there's any one particular area that we haven't covered, could you, please let us know so I make sure that I get that up so people have access to it?
No, but I want to say a few words on the core issue here. What this actually boils down to ultimately. Ultimately, it is how we view the world and how we view each other as human beings. Do we believe that human beings are ultimately good, or do we believe that human beings are ultimately evil? Because if we falsely believe the latter, that human beings are ultimately evil, then we're going to allow ourselves to be guided, by our worst instincts, and the ultimate result is going to be disastrous for everybody. But if we rightly believe and act accordingly that we are decent, that human beings are decent to the core, And if that were not the case, we wouldn't be so successful as a species. We wouldn't be in the situations that we are today, namely that we are victims of our own success. Then we can turn everything around. Then no problem is great enough and no problem is insurmountable. And we are in this together. This is something that can only be solved together. We either solve this together or we are going down together. And that is irrespective of whether the the eugenic or the genocidal camp wins, or whether it's the softer UN kind of approach. If this is being pursued through covert methods, however mild or strict, this is going to end up in disaster. But if people rise, if only just 10% of us rise, because that is what is expected, it's the 10% that lead the crowd. If the 10%, if this 1 in 10 rise and join hands and speak, from the same page and demand the same things and stop being, self-centered and just thinking about, their own family and themselves, because we cannot protect ourselves, we cannot protect our families in isolation. Doesn't matter how much money we have. We can only protect ourselves by rising up as one and acting as one and saving the future and saving this planet for everybody. That is the only way we're going to succeed here.
I absolutely agree, and I fully believe that we are good beings. I mean, you see a baby born with a smile on its face and a sense of, awe of the world, and how can you say that that's inherently bad? I mean, I know that we've got this thing won, Kevin. I really feel that in my heart. That's why we're all coming together and finding each other and putting voices together. And what you've had to endure is just beyond comprehension to put this information out there. We are so grateful for everything that you've done. And we're not going away. I mean, we're just scratching the surface on what we're doing with this right now. Kevin, I want to stay in touch with you to make sure that we're doing the most efficient, effective information sharing in every way possible to get the word out there and get people involved. And, we'd like to see more than just 10% come together here.
Yes. And I'm certain that we will. In the not-so-distant future, it could be, in a month, it could be in 6 months, it could be in 1 year. This is going to be on everyone's lips.
I say it on every podcast. I mean, we have seen these uprisings in other countries. It's coming to America. It's coming to North America, Canada, what have you, and, it's going to be all about cooperation. We're not going to make it through this next level of our advancement as a civilization if we don't put an emphasis on cooperation. And ultimately, forgiveness is going to have to play a role there. And at the end of the day, I have to try to reckon the sense of love which is just. I think that understanding that there's an element of love which is just and the truth is like a sword, so to speak. It'll come and cut through these things, and there's going to have to be some people here that pay the price for what they've been doing, and holding these people accountable in a righteous way is something that I'm certainly glad it's not my responsibility.
Yeah. On this note, I just want to quote the great Mahatma Gandhi. He said, I once believed that God is truth. Now I know that truth is God.
Wow. That's awesome. I've never heard that one before.
That will set us free.
Absolutely. That's right, yeah. Quote Jesus there. And that's fascinating. What a great interview. I think that just went so well, guys. I'm so happy to be here with you, Kevin and Kim. Yeah, absolutely. I think that we really are just scratching the surface, and certainly as we begin to get into the communities out here, which is what we're gearing up to do right now, Kevin, we would certainly like to have you back and to keep you posted of how this is going and try to use this as a model. I mean, of course, Toronto is a good example of a city which had their fluoride removed. Isn't that right?
It's Toronto not yet, but Ottawa and Winnipeg and other Canadian cities. Actually, fluoridation now in Canada is below 30%, so it's dying out. But what I wanted to say is I am at your beck and calling at any time. Obviously, my life has not belonged to me for the past 4 years. I have not had a life. I'm whether I like it or not, I'm becoming a public figure, and this task is so enormous that I know that the future entails work day and night, and I'm more than willing to give that. I consider myself fortunate, really, to be able to have a global impact, and I consider myself fortunate that yes, I have had to make these sacrifices, but now I am privy to knowledge and allowed to speak about issues that nobody else is, and this is only the prerogative now of people who are not in the system, people like us. And only we can crack this nut and turn this around and save everybody else. So it is now we are tasked, by circumstances with saving mankind and saving this planet. This is what is at stake here. And if these are not issues that merit, the greatest sacrifices, then I don't know what is. If we cannot marshal behind these issues, and if we cannot get animated and excited about this, then we're already dead. And
I'm dumbfounded by that.
Transform everything.
Yeah, we wholeheartedly agree all the way from, we're here for you anytime, all the way through. You just, you carried that out so well, man. It is exactly how I feel pretty much. I could sum it up that way in what you just said. That's very well said. Thank you for that.
I know we're on the same page, and of course, it's the issue that brings us to the same page. It strikes at the core of everything, and it makes our heart beat 10 times faster, and it reminds us of what it takes to be human and humane, and to succeed. And we are now we are in this situation where we're so so wealthy and so privileged, and we have these relatively easy lives because countless generations before us have fought and died and worked so that their children live better. Now it is our turn to make sure that our children live better than we.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, then, on that note, we are going to wrap up today's conversation, and I am so very grateful, Kevin, again, for everything that you've done. We will continue this conversation. I think what we'd like to do after getting the information out there in a big way is to follow up and focus on some results, trying to see what kind of activities that are going on in the groups, and just we're gonna really keep on this. This is not something that we just look at today and forget about tomorrow. We're gonna stay on this subject heavily and on a daily basis. So know that we're here for you. This is a team effort, and if anyone else has something to say, I'll let you say that, and then we'll close for the evening.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, Kimberlee and Eugene, and thank you to the audience for taking the time to listen to us. And I hope that we have moved them into action.
Eugene?
I'd like to say for all the people out there following along, whether on the website or Facebook or whatever, please share this information with as many people as you can. And thanks so much for listening. And thank you both, Kimberlee and Kevin, for being here today. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you both, and to that we'll finish recording, and we will all talk very soon. God bless you.
Thank you.